Relay access granted. Archive access granted. Channel 9, Episode 4, The 10th Seat.
I should have turned around when I saw the building. That's the part people always focus on whenever I tell this story. The clearing, the tower, the fact that I'd spent weeks chasing a place that wasn't supposed to exist and somehow managed to find it anyway. But the truth is, none of that scared me. Not at first. By then, I'd already heard voices coming from dead radio frequencies. I'd spoken to people who remembered towns that had vanished from history. I'd watched my phone lose service in places that shouldn't have existed and listened to recordings that seemed more interested in me than I was in them. A building in the woods barely made the list. I stood at the edge of the clearing and stared at Site 9. The facility looked older than anything I'd expected. Most relay stations are small, utility buildings, equipment sheds, places designed to be ignored. This wasn't that. A 3-story concrete structure sat in the center of the clearing, surrounded by rusted fencing and dead grass. A communications tower rose behind it, disappearing into the gray afternoon sky. Several of the warning lights near the top still blinked. Slow, steady, working. That bothered me more than it should have. The place should have been abandoned decades ago. Instead, it looked asleep, waiting. The silence around it felt wrong. Forests aren't quiet. Even in the middle of nowhere, you hear something. Birds, insects, wind through the leaves. There was nothing. Not a single sound. I checked my phone. No signal. I checked it again a few seconds later, even though I knew that wouldn't change anything. Still nothing. I remember thinking about Mara. She would have hated this. Actually, that's not true. She would have loved the mystery right up until the point where we reached the clearing. Then she would have looked at me, called me an idiot, and convinced us both to leave. The fact that I was standing there alone suddenly felt like a mistake. I considered turning around. I really did. Then I noticed the front door was slightly open, just enough to reveal darkness inside. The moment I saw it, a strange feeling settled in my stomach. Not fear, recognition. Like I'd seen that doorway before. Like some part of me already knew what waited on the other side. I wish I could explain that better. I can't. All I know is that when I looked at that door, I stopped feeling like I'd discovered Site 9. I started feeling like Site 9 had discovered me, and somehow it had been expecting me to arrive. I walked toward the fence first. That seemed safer than going straight for the door. Maybe I thought if I stayed outside a little longer, I could convince myself I was still in control. Like this was an investigation. Like I had chosen to come here and could choose to leave whenever I wanted. The fence stood about 8 feet tall with coils of rusted barbed wire along the top. Most of it had leaned inward over the years, dragged down by vines and weather, but the gate was still upright. There was an old chain wrapped around it and a padlock hanging loose through the links. Not broken, unlocked. Someone had opened it and then put it back in place to make it look secured. I didn't touch it right away. That probably sounds stupid. It was just a gate. Just a chain. But after everything that had happened, I had started paying attention to little things. The wrong things. The details people overlook because they don't feel important until later. And later, everything feels important. The padlock was newer than the chain. Not brand new, but newer. The chain was eaten with rust and flaked orange against my fingers when I finally lifted it. The padlock still had weight to it, still moved cleanly, no resistance, no grime packed in the keyhole. Someone had used it recently. I pushed the gate open, and it screamed on its hinges. The sound tore through the clearing so violently that I froze with both hands still on the metal. For a second, I expected something inside the building to answer. Nothing did. The silence swallowed the sound almost immediately. That was worse. I stepped through and let the gate hang open behind me. The ground inside the fence was strange. Outside the perimeter, weeds grew tall and wild, fighting their way through dead leaves and broken branches. Inside, the grass was short and colorless, flattened in wide patches like something heavy had been dragged across it. There were tire tracks near the side of the building, fresh enough that the mud inside them hadn't dried. I crouched beside one and touched it with 2 fingers. Wet. I looked around the clearing again. No vehicles, no people, no sound. Just the tower lights blinking above me, slow, steady, working. The front of the building had no windows on the first floor, just stained concrete, a metal door hanging slightly ajar, and an old sign bolted beside it. Most of the lettering had peeled away, but I could still make out pieces of it. County Emergency Communications Auxiliary Relay Site 9, authorized personnel only. Beneath that, someone had scratched a sentence into the metal with something sharp. Do not complete the circuit. I read it twice, then a third time. The words were deep. Not spray paint. Not marker. Whoever wrote them had carved them in hard enough to leave jagged silver lines through the rust. I reached for my phone to take a picture, but the screen wouldn't turn on. It had been almost fully charged before I left Briar Road. I remembered checking it in the car. 78%. Now it was black. No low battery icon, no response. Just dead glass reflecting my face back at me. For one stupid moment, I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because it felt personal. Every time I got close to an answer, the world took away one more normal thing. Signal, power, maps, time. Now even the option to document what I was seeing had been removed. I put the phone back in my pocket and stood there in front of the open door. Inside, the building smelled like dust, damp concrete, and old electricity. That last part is hard to describe if you've never been around old communications equipment. It's not smoke exactly, not burning wire. More like hot metal and stale air trapped inside machines that have been running too long without anyone caring enough to shut them off. The lobby was small. There was a reception counter along one wall, a bolted-down chair behind it, and a plastic sign-in sheet holder mounted near the entrance. The holder was empty. The floor was covered in dirt except for a path running straight from the door to the hallway beyond. A clean path. Not spotless, not polished, but disturbed, used. My shoes left prints in the dust as I stepped inside. They weren't the first. There were other footprints already there. Boot prints, several sets. Some old enough to blur at the edges. One set fresh. I followed them with my eyes. They led down the hallway and disappeared around a corner. I should have left then. I know that now. A dead facility is one thing. A dead facility with fresh tire tracks, an unlocked gate, and recent footprints is something else. I told myself it might be county maintenance. Maybe the site wasn't abandoned after all. Maybe Walter Mercer had been wrong, or maybe he'd lied because he didn't want me finding something embarrassing. Government paperwork gets messy. Old facilities get repurposed. Strange places have boring explanations all the time. I almost believed that. Then I saw the clocks. There were 3 of them mounted above the reception counter. One labeled county, one labeled dispatch, one labeled relay. The county clock was stopped at 3:17. The dispatch clock was moving backward. The relay clock had no hands at all. I stared at them longer than I should have. The second hand on the dispatch clock ticked in reverse with perfect confidence. Tick, 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 like it had never known any other direction. That was when the radio clicked on. Somewhere deeper in the building, a speaker crackled. Not loud, just enough to cut through the silence. Static breathed through the walls. Then a tone, low and steady, the kind we used during emergency tests. My throat tightened before I even understood why. Old habits. Dispatch work trains certain sounds into you. Alert tones, line clicks, open mics, a caller breathing instead of speaking. You learn to react before you think. The tone ended and a voice came through. It was distant, distorted, buried under static. Relay connection established. Archive access granted. Channel 9, Episode 4, The Briar Road Incident. Then the building went silent. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe a minute. Time had already proven it couldn't be trusted here. I wanted to shout, ask who was there, demand some kind of answer, but my voice wouldn't work, because hearing those words inside that building made something clear in a way I hadn't let myself admit before. This wasn't a signal I had found. This wasn't a mystery I was solving. It was a broadcast. And somehow I was part of it. I forced myself to move. The hallway ahead was narrow and lit by emergency lights along the baseboards. Not overhead fluorescents, not natural light. Just red strips near the floor that painted everything in a low, sick glow. Doors lined both sides. Most were closed. A few had labels. Maintenance, battery room, tape storage, field operations. I tried the first door. Locked. The second opened into a small office with metal desks and filing cabinets. Everything inside had been left as if people expected to come back after lunch. A coffee mug sat beside a stack of yellowed forms. A corkboard held curled notices and faded schedules. A calendar hung on the wall. June, 1983. Every date after the 14th had been crossed out with black marker. Not marked off one by one. Crossed out all at once. The lines were violent, thick enough to tear the paper in places. On the desk nearest the door was a binder labeled Briar Road Maintenance Rotation. I opened it. Most of the pages were dry and brittle. Names, shift times, equipment checks, fuel logs, normal things. Then the entries started getting strange. June 9th, interference reported during overnight monitoring. Source unknown. Possible atmospheric bounce. June 10th, second report of unauthorized transmission. Voice pattern unclear. Repeats between 3:12 and 3:19 a.m. June 11th, tower light observed active despite manual shutdown. Battery levels normal. Recommend full inspection. June 12th, dispatch heard call tone from disconnected line. No originating address. June 13th, Mercer requests suspension of lower access until circuit fault identified. I froze on that line. Mercer. Walter. I had known he was connected to Relay 9, but seeing his name there felt different. It made him real inside this place. Not just an old man in a house full of equipment. Not just someone who knew too much and wanted me gone. He had been here. He had tried to stop something. I turned the page. June 14th. Briar Road crew dispatched at 2240. Lower relay inspection authorized by Supervisor Vane. Personnel on site: Ellis Vane, Harold Mercer, Thomas Greer, Lionel Price, Ruth Bell, Patrick Wynn. At the bottom of the page, written in different handwriting, were 4 words. Only Mercer came back. The office felt colder after that. I closed the binder and stood there listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no radio. I should have left with the binder. Taken it and run. Even without my phone, even without proof, it was something. A physical record, names, dates. But I didn't, because the door across the hall had opened while I was reading. I was sure it had been closed before. Now it stood halfway open. The label on it read, tape storage. I stepped back into the hallway. The air seemed thicker there, warm near the ceiling and cold at my feet. I pushed the door open with 2 fingers. The room beyond was larger than the office, with shelves running from floor to ceiling. Cardboard boxes, reel-to-reel tapes, cassette cases, maintenance recordings, incident reports. Some of the shelves had collapsed under their own weight, spilling tapes across the floor in tangled black ribbons. A single desk lamp was on in the back of the room, plugged into nothing. It lit a metal table. On the table was an old reel-to-reel machine. A tape had already been threaded through it. Beside the machine sat a label card. Briar Road Incident, June 14, 1983. Lower relay audio. Do not archive. I stared at the card, then at the machine, then back at the door. Every reasonable part of me knew this was a trap. Not maybe, not possibly. It was too arranged, too deliberate, too theatrical. A lit room, a prepared tape, a label waiting for me like a place card at a dinner table. But that's the thing about answers. When you've been starving for them long enough, you'll eat even if you know the food is poisoned. I pressed play. The reels turned. At first there was only static. Then a man's voice came through. This is Supervisor Ellis Vane, Site 9 Auxiliary Relay, June 14, 1983. Time is 22:46. We're entering the lower maintenance level in response to ongoing signal bleed and unauthorized transmission through county dispatch bands. A second voice muttered in the background. Unauthorized my ass. Thing called me by name. Vane spoke again, closer to the microphone. Present are myself, Thomas Greer, Lionel Price, Ruth Bell, Patrick Wynn, and Harold Mercer. Recording will remain continuous until inspection is complete. Someone laughed nervously. Then came footsteps, metal stairs, a door opening. The tape hissed and warped as if the machine struggled to hold the sound in place. A woman spoke next. "Temperature drop at first landing. You feel that?" Another man answered, "Yeah, feels like a freezer down here." Vane said, "Note that lower level temperature has decreased significantly since last inspection." Then another sound came through. A knocking. 3 slow knocks. My hands curled around the edge of the table. The same rhythm. The same patient spacing. Knock, knock, knock. On the tape, nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Mercer said, "That's not below us." Vane asked what he meant. Mercer answered, "That's coming from the relay line." Static surged. A tone sounded. Then a voice came through the recording. Not from the men. Not from the room. From somewhere else. "Line open." One of the crew swore. Vane tried to stay calm. "Identify yourself." The voice replied, "Briar Road." Vane asked who it was. The voice repeated, "Briar Road." Then another voice joined it. Then another. Then several more. All overlapping. Men, women, children, old voices, young voices, some crying, some whispering, all saying the same thing, Briar Road. The recording distorted, and when it cleared, the crew was walking again. Their breathing had changed. You could hear it, that tight, shallow breathing people do when they're pretending not to panic. Ruth Bell said they needed to turn around. Vane said they were not leaving until they identified the fault. Mercer snapped that it wasn't a fault. A loud metallic groan cut through the tape. Then Patrick Wynne shouted that the door had just closed behind them. Another voice told him to open it. Metal rattled. Someone hit something hard. Again. The door didn't open. Vane told everyone to remain calm. Nobody sounded calm. The knocking started again, this time closer. Knock, knock, knock. Then the tape went silent. Not static. Silent. The reels kept turning, but nothing came out. The desk lamp flickered. I leaned closer without meaning to. A whisper came through. "Harold." Mercer answered from the tape. "No." The whisper repeated his name. Mercer said louder, "No, don't answer it." Ruth asked, "Answer what?" The whisper changed. Now it sounded like a woman. "Ruth," she gasped. Then it became a child's voice. "Patrick." Then a man's voice. "Thomas." One by one it called them, until finally it said, "Ellis." Vane didn't respond. The whisper laughed softly. Then it said, "There are supposed to be 10. The tape screeched. I ripped my hand away from the machine even though I hadn't touched it. The voices on the tape erupted all at once. Not screaming yet, talking. Hundreds of voices layered together, words colliding until none of them made sense. Then, underneath them, I heard something steady. A dispatch tone. The same tone from the lobby, the same tone from the broadcasts. Vane shouted over the noise for someone to shut it down. Someone yelled that there was no switch. Mercer screamed, "Don't complete the circuit." Then came the first real scream. I don't know whose it was. I don't want to know. The recording became chaos. Footsteps pounding, metal banging, people shouting over each other. Ruth Bell crying, Patrick Wynne praying, Thomas Greer yelling that someone was standing at the end of the hall, Vane demanding names, demanding counts, demanding everyone stay together, and Mercer repeating the same thing again and again. Don't answer it, don't answer it, don't answer it. Then the static swallowed everything. For several seconds, there was only noise. Then one voice returned. Calm. Clear. Mine. Caleb. I stopped breathing. The voice on the tape said my name again. Caleb. The reels continued spinning. You're listening too early. I stumbled backward, knocking into a shelf. Several tape boxes fell around me, bursting open across the floor. The machine kept playing. My voice said, "You need to leave before Mara calls." The tape clicked, then stopped. The desk lamp went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I stood there with my back against the shelf, shaking hard enough that the metal rattled behind me. And then my phone rang. Not buzzed, not chimed. Rang. A clean, modern ringtone inside a dead concrete building where the phone had been useless minutes earlier. I pulled it from my pocket. The screen was on. Battery, 3%. No signal bars. Incoming call. Mara. I answered so fast I nearly dropped it. Mara said my name and her voice was sharp with panic. I had never heard her sound like that before. She asked where I was. I didn't answer right away, so she asked again. I told her I was at Site 9. There was silence on her end. Then she said, "No, you're not." I told her I had found it. She told me I needed to leave wherever I was right now. I asked what happened, and she said every monitor in dispatch had just turned on. Every station, every dead screen, even the old training monitor in the storage room. All of them came on at the same time. I asked what they showed. She took one shaky breath and said, "A death notice." My mouth went dry. I asked who it was for, even though some part of me already knew. Mara didn't answer until I said her name. Then she said, "It had your name." The hallway outside the tape room clicked. A light came on somewhere beyond the door, then another, then another. One at a time, moving away from me down the hall, like something was showing me where to go. Mara kept talking. She said the death notice had my full name, the current timestamp, and my current location. Site 9. Then there was a line at the bottom. I asked what line. Her voice broke slightly when she answered. "Broadcast pending." The phone popped with static. I pressed it tighter to my ear and told her to listen to me. I told her there were people here, or there had been people here. I told her I had found records, that there had been an incident in 1983, that Walter Mercer was part of it. She cut me off and said she had already called units. That hit me harder than I expected. I told her no. I told her not to send anyone. She asked what I meant. She said I had disappeared into the woods, chasing a place that didn't exist. And then my death notice had shown up at dispatch. I told her she didn't understand. She said maybe she understood enough. I told her if they came here, something happened. She said something was already happening. The hallway light nearest the tape room flickered. Then Mara said my name differently, lower, more afraid. She told me the timestamp on the death notice wasn't for now. I looked at the dark screen of the reel-to-reel machine and asked what it was. She was quiet for too long. When I said her name again, she answered. 7 minutes from when it appeared. The light outside the door flickered again. Then the speaker in the hallway crackled, and my own voice came through it. 6 minutes. I turned toward the door. Mara heard it too. She whispered, "Caleb, who was that?" The speaker clicked again. "Lower access required." The phone connection hissed. I told Mara to stay away from this. I told her not to come here and not to let anyone else come here. She said, "Too late." Then the call cut off. My phone died in my hand. For 1 second, I just stood there staring at the black screen. Then every speaker in the building activated at once. "Lower access required." The voice was mine, but not me. I know people say that in stories all the time. They hear their own voice and somehow they know it's wrong. This was worse. It wasn't wrong. That was the problem. It sounded exactly like me. My tone, my rhythm, the slight rasp I get when I'm tired. It sounded like a recording of me made by someone who had been listening for a very long time. I stepped into the hallway. The red lights along the baseboards had changed. They no longer led toward the front lobby. They led deeper into the building, past the offices, past the battery room, to a stairwell door at the end of the hall. A sign above it read, "Relay Access." The door was open. Beyond it, stairs descended into darkness. I didn't want to go down there. That's the truth. I know I went. Obviously I went. But I need you to understand something. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was pressure. A feeling in the center of my chest like a hand pushing from behind my ribs. Every time I looked toward the lobby, the air seemed to tighten. Every time I looked toward the stairs, I could breathe again. The building didn't force me. It persuaded me, and that is worse. I walked to the stairwell. On the inside of the door, someone had painted a warning in black letters. Lower relay access prohibited after June 14th. Beneath it, scratched deep into the paint, were 9 tally marks. Under the tallies was the same phrase from the tape. There are supposed to be 10. I descended the stairs. The temperature dropped almost immediately. By the first landing, I could see my breath. The walls changed from painted concrete to older stone blocks, damp and uneven. That made no sense. The building above was from the 70s or 80s at the earliest, but the lower level looked older, much older. The stairs kept going, too far. 3 stories became 5, 5 became 8. I counted at first. Then I stopped because counting felt dangerous there. At the bottom was a corridor with a low ceiling and pipes running along both walls. Old cable bundles sagged from hooks overhead. Some had split open, exposing wires that looked blackened and brittle. At the far end of the corridor, a red light pulsed above a metal door. Not blinked, pulsed, like a heartbeat. I walked toward it. Halfway down the corridor, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Nothing. The stairwell was empty. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps continued, but they weren't behind me. They were ahead. On the other side of the metal door. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. I backed up. The speaker above the door crackled, and my voice whispered, "Don't let him see you." I looked at the speaker and asked who. The answer came after a pause. "Me." Something struck the other side of the metal door. Not hard, just one soft knock, then a second, then a third. The red light above the door went dark. For a moment, the corridor was completely black. Then emergency lights snapped on behind me, not toward the stairs, toward another passage branching off to the left. I took it. I hate admitting that. I took it because the building told me to. The passage sloped downward and opened into a large circular room. At first, I thought it was some kind of server chamber. The walls were lined with equipment racks, switchboards, old analog panels, and miles of cable feeding into a central column that rose from the floor into the ceiling. Then I saw the chairs. 10 chairs were arranged in a circle around the column. 9 were occupied. Not by bodies, not exactly. By uniforms. Work jackets, boots, hard hats, headsets. Each set arranged as if someone had been sitting there and then vanished, leaving everything behind in the exact shape of a person. The 10th chair was empty. A microphone hung above it, waiting. I stood at the entrance, unable to move. The central column hummed. Not mechanical, vocal. Thousands of voices layered together so softly they became vibration more than sound. On the floor near the empty chair, someone had written in chalk, "Do not sit down." Beside that, in newer handwriting, someone had written, "He always sits down." My stomach twisted. I stepped closer to the nearest chair. A name tag was clipped to the jacket. Ruth Bell. The next chair was Patrick Wynn, then Thomas Greer, Lionel Price. Names from the recording. There were more, people I didn't know, people who must have come later, people who had found the site after Briar Road and never really left it. One jacket had Harold Mercer stitched above the pocket, but the chair was empty. No boots, no hard hat, no headset, only the jacket, folded neatly across the seat. Walter had made it out, or part of him had. A monitor beside the central column flickered to life. Green text appeared on a black screen. Partial circuit active, 9 confirmed, 1 pending. Then the screen changed. Subject, Caleb Rusk. I backed away. The microphone above the empty chair lowered slightly, and the speaker crackled. "Please take your position." I said no. My voice shook, but at least it was mine. The speaker answered in my voice. "You already did." The monitor changed again. A grainy video feed appeared. At first I thought it showed the room I was standing in, but then I realized the angle was wrong. It was pointed toward the facility entrance outside. The tower stood in the background. The front gate was open. A man stood near it with his back to the camera. The timestamp in the corner read, October 17th, 1987. I leaned closer. The man turned, and my blood went cold. It was me, not someone who looked like me. Me. Same face, same hair, Same jacket I was wearing in that moment. The Caleb on the monitor looked directly into the camera. Then he smiled. Behind me, the empty chair scraped across the floor. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. 1 second, I was in the circular room. The next, I was sprinting through the passage, lungs burning from the cold air, hands scraping the walls as I stumbled toward the corridor. The speaker system followed me. My voice came from everywhere. 5 minutes. I hit the main corridor and turned toward the stairs. The metal door at the far end stood open now. Beyond it was darkness, and from that darkness came footsteps, slow, patient, not chasing. That was what made them terrible. They didn't hurry because they didn't need to. They knew where I was going. I reached the stairs and climbed. At first I took them 2 at a time. Then the stairwell changed. I know that sounds impossible. It was impossible. But I swear to you, the stairs were not the same stairs I had come down. The walls were narrower. The landings were closer together. The red lights flickered with every step. Doors appeared where there hadn't been doors before, each one marked with dates. June 14th, 1983. October 17th, 1987. March 3rd, 1994. August 22nd, 2001. Then one that made me stop so abruptly I almost fell. Today's date. I stared at it. The door was cracked open. Inside I could hear dispatch, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, Mara's voice asking where I was. I took 1 step toward it. Then I heard another voice inside that room. Mine. Tell them to open the door. I slammed the stairwell door shut and kept climbing. The speaker crackled. 4 minutes. The footsteps below entered the stairwell. 1 step, then another. I didn't look back. At some point, the stairwell ended at a door I recognized. Relay access. I burst through into the first-floor hallway. The building had changed. Every door was open now. Every room was lit. Every clock on the wall was moving backward. The lobby speaker blared a dispatch tone. Monitors lined the hallway where there had been none before, each one displaying a different camera feed. Me entering the gate. Me standing in the lobby. Me listening to the tape. Me on the phone with Mara. Me descending the stairs. Then feeds I hadn't lived yet. Me sitting in the 10th chair. Me speaking into the microphone. Me smiling at the camera. I ran toward the front door, but it slammed shut hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The old reception clock fell from the wall and shattered on the floor. The speaker said, 3 minutes. I grabbed the front door handle and pulled. It didn't move. I threw my shoulder into it. Once, twice. Pain shot down my arm. Nothing. Behind me, footsteps entered the hallway. I turned. At the far end, near the stairwell, someone stood in the red light. Me. Not a reflection, not a shadow. Me. His head tilted slightly, like he was trying to remember how to wear my face. I couldn't move. He took 1 step forward. The hallway lights flickered. Another step. His smile widened. Not much, just enough. Then the radio on the reception counter crackled, and a voice came through. Not mine. Walter Mercer. Caleb, if you can hear this, don't use the door. My eyes snapped to the radio. Static hissed under his voice. Windows are sealed. Front entrance is part of the loop. Go through field operations. North wall. Maintenance chute. The other Caleb stopped walking. His smile vanished. Walter said, move. I moved. I ran down the side hall, past the offices, past doors that slammed shut as I passed. The other Caleb screamed behind me. Not words. A tone. The same emergency tone from dispatch, stretched into something almost human. I found field operations by accident or memory or whatever the site had put in my head. The room was full of maps, county maps, state maps, old utility diagrams. Most were wrong. Roads that didn't exist, towns that had vanished, relay lines stretching across places where no lines had ever been built. On the north wall was a vent cover held by 4 screws. The screws were already loose. I tore the vent cover free and crawled inside. The chute was too narrow. Concrete scraped my elbows. Dust filled my mouth. Somewhere behind me, the field operations door burst open. The other Caleb whispered into the vent. "You're going the wrong way." I kept crawling. He said, "You always go the wrong way." The chute sloped upward. Cold air rushed past me from behind, carrying voices with it. Ruth, Patrick, Thomas, Ellis Vane, people from the tape, people from the chairs, all whispering over one another. "Don't complete it, don't sit down, don't answer, don't listen, don't go home." The last one made me hesitate. A hand slammed against the vent behind me. I crawled faster. Ahead, the chute ended in a square of gray light. I kicked at the grate. Once, twice. It popped loose and fell outward. I dropped through after it and landed hard in dead grass outside the building. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I rolled onto my back and stared up at the tower. The red lights were blinking faster now, not slow, not steady, frantic. From inside the building, the speakers blared, "2 minutes!" I forced myself up. The gate was still open. The tree line waited beyond it. I ran. Behind me, every light in Site 9 went out at once. The silence that followed was so complete that I almost stopped. Then the tower light flashed one final time. White. Not red. White. The blast threw me forward. There was no sound at first, just pressure. Then everything came rushing back all at once. The cracking of trees, the ringing in my ears, the distant wail of sirens. I hit the ground outside the fence and lay there, half conscious, staring at the sky through branches. I don't know how long I stayed that way. When I opened my eyes again, Mara was kneeling over me. Her face was pale. There were deputies behind her. Flashlights, radios, people shouting. Someone kept asking if I could hear them. I could. I just couldn't answer yet. Mara grabbed my face with both hands and said my name. I looked past her. The building was dark, dead. No tower lights, no hum, no red glow through the windows. Just an abandoned concrete structure in the woods. Exactly what everyone expected to find. That was the cruelest part. By the time help arrived, Site 9 had gone back to pretending. The official explanation was a lightning strike. That's what the county said. A storm system had moved through the area, even though none of us remembered seeing clouds. Some kind of electrical surge had triggered old equipment in an abandoned relay facility. My injuries were from falling while trespassing. The death notice at dispatch was classified as a system error caused by corrupted legacy software nobody could identify. The records I mentioned were not found. The tape room was empty. The lower access stairwell didn't exist. According to the inspection report, Site 9 had no basement. Mara didn't argue with them. Not out loud. But she believed me. I know she did because she wouldn't look at the building when they escorted us back through the gate. And because later that night after the hospital released me with a concussion and a bruised shoulder, she emailed me a file. No subject, no message, just an attachment. It was an old county personnel record for Ellis Vane, supervisor of the Emergency Communications Auxiliary Relay Program. Reported missing October 17, 1983. Declared dead October 17, 1987. That date made my hands go numb. At the bottom of the file was a scanned photograph. The image showed a group of relay workers standing in front of Site 9. 9 people. I counted them 3 times. Ellis Vane stood in the center wearing a supervisor's jacket. Ruth Bell stood near the left edge holding a clipboard. Harold Mercer was younger then, maybe 30, maybe a little older, standing stiffly with his hands at his sides. The others matched the names from the tape. But at the far right edge of the frame, almost cut off by the border, there was another man, a 10th person. He stood slightly apart from the group. No uniform, no name tag. Just a dark jacket and a familiar face. Mine. I stared at that photograph until my eyes watered. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly threw it across the room. 1 new voicemail. No missed call. No caller ID. The voicemail was 6 seconds long. For a while, I couldn't make myself play it. When I finally did, there was no static, no tone, no distortion. Just my voice. Quiet. Close. Terrified. "Caleb, do not go home.